Welcome back to another episode of Our Interesting Times. It is my pleasure to have Dr. E. Michael Jones back on the show. He returns to discuss Donald Trump, his first few weeks in office. Very energetic, a lot of activity, a lot of executive orders, some good, some bad. As of course, that's what we can expect. This is politics. It's always a mixed bag with politics. Usually more bad than good. We have what's going on? Oh, first, sorry, of course, Dr. Jones, you're the editor of Culture Wars magazine, the author of many books, including the Holocaust Narrative, and I just saw the advert for it for the new book that's coming out. I guess in a matter of weeks, right? Walking with a Bible and a Gun: The
Yes.
Rise and Fall and Return of American Identity. And you're also planning a trip to promote this book in Southeastern Europe, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what are the details on that?
Well, I can, if you mail me at culturewars.com, I can send you a brochure.
Okay,
Uh,
and all the
but
details for that.
but it's going to be on American identity, and that's the topic of the hour. I think this is a significant moment. Once again, I'm on the cusp of the zeitgeist here.
I think you are.
This is what's happening right now, as we speak, right now.
It's about time. I think you're in your eighth decade, right?
Am I that old? Gosh, I didn't
Well,
even.
your 70s is your eighth decade. It makes you sound older, but I thought I'd do that for effect.
I think there's something significant about 80 years. And I think nothing lasts more than 80 years, and that includes the Jewish kingdom. Everybody knows the Jewish kingdom. No Jewish kingdom has lasted longer than 80 years. The question is, has any kingdom lasted longer than 80 years? And the question is, has America lasted longer than 80 years?
Well, it goes through these cycles. We have the third turning, right? 240 years, and some say America, of course, isn't the same country it was when it was founded,
Right.
and it certainly wasn't the same it was in 1860, and it certainly wasn't the same it was in 1941. And
Absolutely.
it's 80 years. Or now
That's
that's
right.
another thing. Looking at Trump, and I think that's how we can look at some of these executive orders, sort of the internal contradictions of the second Trump administration. I
Absolutely.
think is the decline of the post-war consensus,
Absolutely.
and how we're trying to figure this out. That's why we see this conflict in Trump administration, where he's saying all these executive orders that are positive signs, like taking on the culture war. He's defunding U.S. aid, exposing that fraud. Looking to dismantle the Department of Education. He's taking on DEI and some of the culture war stuff. All this insane transgender agenda that was promoted for the past few years appears to be securing the border and getting hold of immigration, which is a big part. Again, that's the big goes back to your American identity, because multiculturalism and immigration had a big impact on American identity in the latter part of the 20th century. At the same time, he appears to be pandering to the same Jewish lobby, which really ultimately is behind a lot of what vexes America in the 21st
Absolutely.
century. So I'll let you take it from there.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is exactly the point. What was the hidden grammar of the Third American Republic?
Mm-hmm. Make it sound like France.
It is. It is. What was the hidden grammar of the Third American Republic, which began in 1945 and is now ending? 2025. That's 80 years. What was the hidden grammar? The Holocaust narrative.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. And that I have this quote from James Baker I just saw. He said, basically, yeah, we demonized Hitler because we wanted to win the war, but that campaign got out of control and no one can stop it now. Well, that's what the Jews took it over. They created the Holocaust narrative. That's the gist of that book. And that became the foundation of the American Empire, the Third American Empire, or the Third Republic.
Well,
First one lasted from
yeah.
1776 to 1860, Civil War. What's the fundamental principle here? Every revolution leads to a civil war. Every revolution leads to a civil war. And so what we're seeing right now is the Trump revolution is now breaking down into a civil war. What am I talking about? Tucker Carlson was hauled into the White House, and the Christian Zionist faction of the Trump revolution read him the Riot Act, and basically, I think, threatened to excommunicate him from the synagogue of Trumpism. This is what's going to happen now. We cannot, Trump is behaving as if everybody who voted for him was a Zionist.
Hmm.
That is not true. That is not true. And he knows it's not true because he kept channeling America first. Whenever he got close to the election, it was America first, and that was channeling American patriotism. And I'm saying that was the real American identity, if you want to, certainly the conservative identity that was strangled in its cradle by the Third Republic, which is the 1945 regime, which was Jewish. Let's be honest here. What did Lindbergh say in his speech? There are three groups that want us to get into the war. The British. Who was it? Who are the three groups?
Well, it's the British, the Roosevelt administration, and the Jewish lobby.
That's right, exactly right. The British, the Roosevelt administration, and the Jews. And as soon as he said the word "the Jews," he touched the third rail, and he was excommunicated from the synagogue.
That was September 11th, 1941, Des Moines, Iowa. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
But then again, after the war, I think Rabbi Stephen Wise boasted that the Jews are influential in getting America into the war.
Yes. So so Trump doesn't understand this. That's going down the drain. What is the whole point of my book, The Holocaust Narrative? It's over. It was over when Steven Spielberg made Schindler's List. The minute he had those, take your clothes off, ladies. The minute he gets them in the shower, has water coming out of the shower heads. That was the end of the Holocaust narrative. They couldn't do it. He couldn't do it because of the Zundel trials. No one was willing to testify, not even the rabbi who was the main authority on the Holocaust. So this is the end of that story. We're having a civil war now, and this is going to be Tucker Carlson's moment, because someone has to emerge as the leader of the anti-Zionist movement, anti-Jewish movement. Another straw in the wind is that Colonel McGregor, who is certainly part of that movement, as is Ray McGovern, all these disgruntled CIA guys, retired CIA guys that get on regularly now, the people you go to now to understand what's happening with the war and stuff like that. These are all these people represent a faction in the CIA and the FBI who are unhappy that the fact that it's been of what basically Merrick Garland did explicitly by turning the FBI into a Jewish enforcement agency that would persecute Catholics because they disagreed with the Jewish sacrament of abortion. There are people in these agencies who don't like that. And their spokesmen are people like, as I said, McGregor and Larry Johnson, Ray McGovern, these people. So it's out there. It's out there. And the question is, what's going to happen? Now, I heard that I didn't look. You think that Tucker Carlson has enough money to fund himself, but he apparently has an organization backing him. And I just heard that Fox is trying to buy up that organization. Is Fox trying to reel this guy in again?
Well, maybe you heard that when Trump met with Bibi Netanyahu and he floated that crazy Gaza idea, which doesn't seem to be going anywhere.
Yeah.
He was given a golden pager.
Yeah. Oh, no. What is this? Is it funny or is it not funny? I don't know. This is grotesque, whatever it is.
Well, it's obviously a message. What I don't.
Yeah, right? We're going to give you a pay. We'll blow you up, buddy.
Yeah,
we'll blow you up. That's the threat. And so this is McGregor comes on and he talks about the meeting and the fact that Trump holds Bibi's chair like as if he's his wife or something like that. And Trump said, well, this shows that Netanyahu represents the powerful Jewish interest. Wait a minute. Colonel, you just said Jew for the first time. I don't think he's ever said the word Jew before.
Didn't he say like international Jewish finance and power or something like that?
It was something like that. Yeah, it was.
So he's like Henry Ford, right? He's
The J word was definitely there, and we're right. You're right. We're right back with Henry Ford and the international Jew. I mean, we're right back there. I'm saying that's the default setting of American conservatism. That's what it's got to be, and that's what Trump tried to challenge. Well, he got my vote by saying it first time around, certainly. And now it's kind of bait and switch once again. It's America first till you get in office, and it's Israel first. So it's not going to work. It will not work. The horse is out of the barn. The cat is out of the bag.
but
We are now talking openly about the Jewish question. How long has it been? How long has it been since I've been talking to you?
about 10 years now.
Okay, so I remember at the beginning we're a little bit wary of each other. You know what I mean? Well, those days are gone. Those days are gone. And I am going to the battle I'm fighting right now is the resurgence of Nazism and fascism and racism.
Well, you're not going to buy was it Ye or Kanye has a T-shirt now with a swastika according to ADL
No, this is totally stupid. This,
on his website. I
no,
didn't see it. I just saw a report. I don't know if it's the ADL. So I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know. Is it
well,
true?
this is an example of what I'm talking about. Elon Musk is promoting Hitler. I don't think there's any question. He's promoting Hitler because this is the quickest way to cripple the movement that I'm talking about. The anti-Jewish American patriotic movement, which finds racism repugnant. This is also the Catholic position. This is the movement that I'm talking about. I was trying to work with Converse when he did that, the JP, the Jewish Problem Conference in Kentucky. I said, Converse, we can't turn this into a white boy movement. There are all these white boys that show up down there. One of them giving the Hitler salute. This is music to the ears of the ADL and the SPLC. And I said, we can't, this is preposterous. You can't do this. You can't expect to have a movement if you're going to have Nazis determining white boys determining who's bona fide and who isn't.
But can't we have a rational adult discussion about revisionist history regarding that period of history without uh, saying "See Kyle"?
You would think so, but
I mean, it's not
would you
like
think?
it's one or the other. It's like kind of like what really happened. What was Hitler really like? What was he guilty of? What was he not guilty of? Without getting into
Well,
this, you know.
that's what I did with the Holocaust
Yeah,
narrative.
yeah.
I put the whole chapter in on Father Lentz's book, Christus in Dachau, and
Mhm.
the fact that there were all these Catholic priests in Dachau, and the white boys blew up at me. I thought you were great. I thought you didn't like Jews. Well, wait a minute. What's this guy? Does that mean I have to like Hitler? Does that mean I have to promote the guy who was putting Catholic priests in this was the Catholic voice emerging, giving order to this chaos, and the white boys didn't like it because they love Hitler. And of course, I think the Jews love it when people love Hitler.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, I run into this too. Now, when you start to entertain the revisionist or skeptical view of the narrative of the Second World War, the sort of the Jewish, the self-serving fairy tale we've been told regarding Hitler and Jewish suffering, and if you start to deconstruct that and challenge it, it inevitably sounds like you're promoting Hitler as opposed to just trying to get an accurate a narrative or description of what actually occurred. I mean, you've been accused of that because you just say that these things didn't happen. Obviously the absurd stories you've been told didn't happen, and all the movies we've been watching, the 1,000 movies we've seen, the probably tens of thousands of times that the Holocaust narrative has factored into a subplot of some TV series, and it's everywhere. It's pervasive. If you start to question that, you're saying, "What are you saying?" I'm not saying that if Hitler wasn't guilty, the Third Reich wasn't guilty of the final solution and the planned, destruction of European Jewry, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're saying everything he did was good. You're just saying that Hitler becomes a more of a typical mid-century centralizing statesman, right? I mean, it's almost like, wait a second, if you start to deconstruct that narrative and you create this equalizing effect, if the Holocaust didn't happen, it was a consequence of the war, total war, the barbarity of war, unintended consequences, coupled with the Allied bombing campaign in Dresden. But we need the Holocaust to justify Dresden, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right?
Well,
And
you needed to distract everyone's attention from
yeah,
American war crimes
yeah.
and the plight of the German people, which was horrendous. You want to talk about millions of people dying? Talk about Germans.
Hmm.
Talk about the expulsion of ethnic Germans from East Prussia, from Silesia, and from the Sudetenland. 11 million Germans. This is not an exaggeration. 11 million Germans are forcibly removed from their ancestral, centuries old homelands and put on the road, old men, women, and children in the middle of winter. And you think there's going to be a happy outcome with that? You think that the people are not going to die by the millions?
Yeah. Yep. And again, it's any German leader, political leader in 1930s, if they had asserted German independence and asserted its power in Central Europe, was going to be attacked.
Right.
Wouldn't you agree? I mean, it didn't necessarily Hitler. Hitler happened to be the one, but any leader that didn't serve the Anglo-American Zio agenda, because this goes back to the 30 Years' War. I mean, this is why you had World War One, because by 1910, Germany had suppressed Great Britain economically, and a war had to be fought to knock Germany down a peg or two. That's why you got the second 30 Years' War.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always said there's I kind of say jokingly is really was a list was really the cause of the Second World War because he's one of his economic plan unified Germany and created a threat to Anglo dominance. You know,
That's right.
no.
That's right.
That's the long historical arc of this thing. We think history begins in 1941 or 1938 or something. No, I mean, come on, you can't take World War II out of the context of the First World War, of course, and the trenches and the hunger blockade and all that, the excesses, the abuses of Weimar, and even the official narrative. People acknowledge that there was a reaction to something, but it just seems to me you can't we they won't let us have a mature rational discussion regarding that period of time because if we
I think
do,
that's exactly the issue. So we're
yeah.
being stampeded into giving the Hitler salute.
Hmm.
Why are they promoting Kanye? Why are they promoting Nick Fuentes, who thinks Hitler is cool? Because they want that, because they need that.
uh,
The Jews need this type of stupidity in order to maintain their narrative, the
but
Holocaust narrative.
Nick's Hispanic. He said it when the police came to his front door.
Yeah, there's a duality here. So when he's online, he's white. Okay, and then when the police show up, he announces, "I'm Mexican."
Yeah, that's what he said. Mexicans, right? He didn't say Spaniard. He said Mexican,
They're
right?
Mexican. Mexicans are by definition mixed race. They're mestiza. Vasconcelos called them the cosmic race because they united the Indians of the New World and the Spaniards of the Old World.
Hmm.
Well, by definition, they're race mixing. And now you've got all this ridiculous talk about race and race mixing. It's preposterous. I don't know what else to say about it. I'm biracial. I'm Irish and German. Why? The only pure racial person I know is a nun from Kenya.
Yeah, I think that's a function. I think I've listened to your critics. I've listened to the debates and the points they make, and I get the impression that most of them haven't read your books.
I get the impression most of them don't know how to read.
I'll be a bit more charitable. Um, but they accuse you of like promoting the civil rights agenda and quote race mixing and these sort of things, when actually you've come in your books and about John Cardinal Kroll and the slaughter of cities, and of course the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit and the various articles you've penned for culture, your magazine Culture Wars. You take on the social engineering, the civil rights movement, the forced integration, the you take on hollow decisions like Brown versus Board of Education. This is social engineering, which messed everything up, really,
Right.
right? If you subtract social engineering from the equation, you get rid of a lot of the tension, and a lot of these problems would have sorted themselves out without any conflict. It just wouldn't have been along progressive, predetermined lines. So
Right.
where the social engineers wanted it.
If you want to talk about race, but you're not going to talk about social engineering out of avoidance or ignorance, You're not in the game.
Mhm.
This is social engineering created race as the weaponized way of driving Catholic ethnics out of their neighborhood. This you go back to, I mean, I've said, you're right. They don't read my books. They don't read my books. And so I'm forced into these arguments where this guy, I mean, this lunatic Lutheran who, I have to be grateful to him. He did show how Luther's state church led inexorably to the Nuremberg laws, the racial laws of Nazis. This is all a function of the state church. Okay, so I'm glad about that, but I mean, do we know? So I'm trying to talk to this guy.
He's the one that said that blacks aren't Americans or something.
Yeah, he said something that's outrageous. They were here before we or I was, certainly my family. But anyway, it's this now. It's
Corey Marler, right? Corey
yeah,
Marler. Yeah.
Corey Mall. Yeah, so I'm trying to listen to him, and then suddenly he's talking about Cocker Spaniels and breeding dogs. And I'm
So, so,
thinking,
so it's
where
a
are
debate
we
about
going here?
it's
Where
so
are you? You're not listening to me. Why are you
zoology.
talking about Cocker Spaniels? I'm talking about human beings. Why are you talking about Cocker Spaniels? And I think at this point, I got to concentrate. I got to focus on what I have to say. This guy is going off into Never Never Land. That's the whole problem on this. It's like talking to an ATM machine. I did this once with a guy. Used to be like that on abortion. You have talking points. That's all you're going to say. You're not listening to what I'm saying. You don't care what I'm saying. There's no point in having this discussion.
Well, I read the comments, and all the comments said that you lost the debate.
Yeah. Well, guess who writes comments like
I commented, said this is typical. I've listened to these things. I didn't listen to the debate, and then I read the comments, and then I said, okay. Then I listened to the debate that's completely different than what's being described in the comments.
Yeah, it's always the same. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
anytime I'm saying, how can I make this clear to people? So I said, why is Obama black?
yeah. He's always half white, right? Yeah,
He's
yeah.
he's got a white mother and he's got a black father. Why is he
Mhm.
black? Why are you ignoring his mother's contribution to his biological makeup?
Well, for political reasons.
Because it's race is a social construct.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. Because the Democratic Party wanted to have the first black president. It's either that or the rule of the South, where one drop of blood makes you not white. But I think it's a social
Yeah,
construct.
yeah,
I don't know how to make it any clearer than to that. I said this to one lady who was going at me, hammer and tongs. I said, "Why is Obama black when his mother's white?" Well, I never heard from her again. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to say. How much clearer can I make it?
Well, if Obama's white, he's not exceptional. If he's black, he becomes exceptional, right?
Why is Pete
Yeah.
Buttigieg a homosexual?
Absentee father.
We are talking about different forms of causality
Well,
here.
I know, but I know your point. Yeah.
Okay, so my answer would be, because if he weren't homosexual, he'd be white. He'd be a white mayor from South Bend, Indiana. Well, who's going to take that seriously? So homosexuality is a social construct, isn't it? It's created for political purposes. And that's not to say that there aren't people who engage in deviant sexual activity, but his identity is a social construct for political purposes. And there are people, I think, who claim to be simply because it's a good career move.
What about, obviously between the different I guess races, if you will, you have what? Caucasoid, Negroid, Mongoloid. I guess that's three kind of,
This is
right?
phenotype.
Right? Phenotype. Okay, what okay.
Okay,
Um,
phenotype, because the whole word race is the classic
yeah.
example of equivocation. This word is equivocal.
Hmm.
Depends on what period you're using it and who's using it.
Hmm.
As I said before, Monsignor O'Connell, writing to Bishop John Ireland about the tenure battle at Catholic U, we cannot portray this as a racial issue. What was he talking about? They're trying
Irish
to.
versus German, I guess, right?
That's right, Irish versus German.
Yeah.
The Irish are trying to drive the German professors out of Catholic University. And he doesn't want to portray it as they are two different races. That's why I say I'm biracial. As of 1890 or so, I would be considered biracial.
Yeah, and I think the reaction that we're seeing, sort of the racial division that's been encouraged in America post civil rights, by the way, which we're supposed to get past this, but the regime is obsessed with it, and is the I think the uh, the worm here in the apple, if you will, sort of is social engineering, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
that
You
it's caused
cannot
all.
talk about race in America without talking about social engineering. Gunnar Myrdal wrote An American Dilemma. That's the inauguration of the campaign of social engineering.
So we have a Swede lecturing Americans about race issues.
Yeah, how many black people do they have in Sweden at that
Well, I
point?
think they're learning. It's a bit more complicated than Gunnar Myrdal thought.
Gunnar,
Racializing.
Gunnar Myrdal did not write that book.
No, it's like Chicago University, guys at Chicago University,
It
right?
was the intelligence establishment in America led
Louis
by
Wirth and not
Louis
Highcraft.
Wirth.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
They wrote the book.
again,
So
that's in Slaughter of the Cities, but then you got to crack that book to know about this, right?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Should I bring this out in suppository form?
No, just do a daily 6 hour podcast.
No. This is my mantra now. Stop scrolling, start reading.
But I mean, I saw this also with your discussion with Gemma. I understood what her discomfort was, because her country is being flooded with aliens,
Right.
and so her reaction, I don't think you were disagreeing with her. She's just reacting to what's happening on the street now, and it's only perfectly natural to see a bunch of people coming in, blacks from North Africa or from people from Middle East. They don't belong there. They've been put there to create this very reaction to destroy Irish identity. And Irish identity is what? It's like red hair, white skin, tweed jackets. That's sort of thing. So they're assaulting the culture. Then we find out that USAID was instrumental in destroying Ireland.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well,
geez.
it's like the Ford Foundation in Philadelphia.
They're white guys, though, right?
Yeah, Ilver does that sound Negro to you?
It's
Some some Scandinavian working for the Ford Foundation. Well, he's white. Well, then where does your racial thesis go now, Jared? Where do you take it from there? It's obvious that this was being orchestrated by people who are every bit as white as the people who they were driving out of their neighborhoods.
and the Quakers are white too, right?
The
Yeah,
Quakers are white too.
not many black Quakers, are there?
Uh, don't know, but I mean,
But I mean, in Philadelphia, there was like, yeah. I mean, so basically, then you have that ethnic. Basically, it's an ethnic conflict, and it's broadly Protestant, Jewish versus Catholic, which then, from an American standpoint, raises lots of questions, because a lot of these people who are lamenting the current situation are, as you say, white boys don't go to church anymore. They're deracinated Protestants,
that's right.
which then gets us back. Oh, then what's real? What's the source of the problem here? And what if it's America itself?
I think that's the conclusion I'm coming to in this book.
It's as a Catholic, American Catholic, as I read, and this is like, maybe I shouldn't read. I go, wait a second, there's something wrong. It's almost like it's not a bug, it's a feature of the American system, and which
Yeah.
you know,
You know, I just watched a really good movie. It's called The Searchers. Classic movie by
John
John
Wayne, yeah,
Ford.
yeah,
John Ford, John Wayne is the star, and it's about miscegenation.
hmm
Absolutely no question about it. The book was written in 1954, which is the same year the Supreme Court handed down Brown versus School Board, which made race an official category of the United States government. And there is this back and forth here, like what does it mean to be white? But there's the crucial figure there. It's as if the guy read, as if John Ford read my book. The Ward Bond character is a preacher with a gun. I'm saying this is the archetype of the American preacher with a gun. What does that mean? You've got the state and the church collapsed into one figure that is neither state nor church, but both. And I think gives birth to America, what the Gelehrter, the Jew from Yale, said, America, the world's fourth great religion. I think that
Hmm.
the country became a religion, the religion of Americanism. And that's what it was. I think that's the religion that George Bush believed in, both George Bushes. And I think that's precisely what happened with over the course of 3 centuries. We became the state and the church fused into one thing that was neither state nor church, but a combination of both. And that's why Ward Bond is that crucial figure in that movie. He's a preacher with a gun.
Yeah, did you I ran into this is something I saw on YouTube. Um the bishop in Yugoslavia right after World War II. Um
The Peanuts?
yes. Um it's about an hour 20-minute movie called The Conversation. It's free on YouTube, and it's a conversation between Bishop what was it, Stupanek?
The Peanuts.
Stupanek, that's how you pronounce it. And he's trying to get him to set up a Yugoslavian Catholic church. And I think you'll enjoy it because there is a long discussion on his ethnic identity as a Croat and his Catholic identity, and how the Catholic identity actually doesn't destroy his Croatian ethnicity. Actually, it perfects it. And they put him on trial for treason because he was
Who's trying to persuade him to do this?
Tito.
Oh, Tito. Okay, yeah.
And it's just a conversation, and it's just back and forth, and it was very good. It's on YouTube for free.
That's fascinating. That's a fascinating idea because that is precisely what the Orthodox Church was. It became a state church.
Well, I don't know because I was thinking when I was watching you because you've made the equation between Yugoslavia as a triple melting pot problem and America's.
Right, right.
Right? There it's Croat, Slav, and Muslim, right?
Croat, Serb, and Muslim.
So I'm sorry, Serbian, yeah.
They're
And so
all
there's well, the Serbs identify as Slav, but the Russian Orthodox, but closer to that rather. But it's a very interesting conversation going back and forth about religion and faith and communism and internet, and who was guilty of what. And it's how he, as head of the Catholic Church there, tried to navigate this tumultuous period of time, and all this was going on. But I sidestepped the conversation. You should watch it. It's on YouTube. It's
yeah.
called The Conversation.
It's parallel to what happened to
Yeah.
Father Fitkow. We published a book called My 33rd Year, which is Father Fitkow in East Prussia. And the Nazis come to power and they drag him in and they're interrogating him. And they throw him into jail. And then the Soviets come in and sweep the Nazis out and they arrest the guy and they put him in jail. So he's going to jail, whether it's the Nazis or the communists.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Catholic Church does not fit into either one, into either totalitarian template. This is the problem. You try to impose these totalitarian templates on reality, and they don't work. They don't work because they're not adequate. They're not adequate expressions of the complexity of life
Mm-hmm.
and the source of our identity, which is not blood or class.
Yeah, and all those distinctions exist. They don't define us, and it's well, that's one thing you get with the problem with I think your dispute with the white boys, people who believe in race realism, is they say race is real. There are differences, and from time to time there are differences, and those differences can be negotiated. But the big problem is social engineering, the forced integration, the promise or the assertion that at any given time that things should all be equal, when obviously God doesn't bestow the same gifts and attributes and temperament on different people. We're all in a way we're all kind of different, and there is a function for borders and for communities. And I mean, after all, Christ said, "Go out and baptize all nations." Didn't say go mix amalgamate all nations, make everyone the same.
What do you mean by a nation? And
Yeah.
then that's exactly the sleight of hand that's being perpetrated by certain people right now. The word race, there is no German word called race. It's they hit Nietzsche imported the word directly from theorists, like, those Houston Stewart Chamberlain. It was before that, Count Gobineau, whatever it was, came from America, spelled it Race in his text. No German knew how to pronounce it, so it got turned into Rasa. What does Rasa mean? What does that mean? And if you quote Faulhaber, Faulhaber uses the word both. He uses the word promiscuously. That's his
Hmm.
problem. He was way too close to the Nazi regime. This is 1933 when he's giving these sermons, and he's talking about Rasseforschung, racial research. Okay, I don't know what that means, but okay. And then he says Rassenpflege. There's nothing wrong with Rassenpflege. What does that mean? That's racial hygiene. Well, wait a minute. What does that mean? Well, he found out. I mean, Faulhaber found out a couple of years later it meant euthanasia. It meant culling the herd. And at that point, the Catholic Church turned against him. And in 37, Pius XI, who was not close to the regime, had the distance of the Bishop of Rome, the Bishop of Rome has from all conflicts. He basically said, no, it's not permissible. We tried to work with these people. We worked out a concordat. Nothing worked. And so we're not going to go along anymore.
Well, he issued an encyclical in German, didn't he?
Mit brennender Sorge.
Yeah.
With burning concern. Yes. So it was an encyclical in German, and it enraged Hitler, and things got worse. And I think this is Pius XII, who was the nuncio in Bavaria, decided, well, I'm not sure this is the right approach. I think people are, I can grandstand here and fulminate from Rome, but I mean, the Catholics in Germany are going to get hurt. They're already in Dachau by the time Pius XII comes in. They're already, Dachau's full of Catholics.
The late Bishop Williamson said Hitler lost the war because he abandoned the Catholic Church.
Well, he should know.
Well, I thought there was
There's another group of people that shouts at me all the time.
But it was an interesting observation you made, because it spoke for what you were saying. Hitler, if he'd be able to invoke his Catholicism and Germany's large Catholic population in his effort to revive Germany, he would have been much firmer ground than he found himself on in 1938.
Of course he would have.
Yeah.
Because the Catholic principle would have been sicut Judaeus non,
Mm-hmm.
which means the first principle is you can't harm the Jew. But on the other hand, you can't let the Jew take over the Justice Department, can you, Merrick? Or the
Yes.
border, can
Yes.
you, Alejandro? We know what happens when you allow Jews to get into positions of authority.
Mm-hmm.
Biden administration should be studied from now on as the cautionary tale about letting Jews into high office.
Yeah. Because they inevitably abuse their power because they think of themselves as Jews first, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Especially those who are given those positions, who worm themselves into power.
They cannot represent the interest of the American people. They cannot do it. They're constitutionally incapable of doing that, and we have to recognize that fact. And this is a type of discourse that we have to move forward here, because there is a large group of people who are becoming very unhappy with Donald Trump after having voted for him. I didn't vote for Donald Trump to send 2,000-pound bombs to Israel. I voted for him to end the wars, which he said he was going to do. Why is the war? What's happening in the Ukraine? Why isn't that the first order of business? He could end that thing in 15 minutes if he wanted to.
Well, I think the moves he's taken against USAID, and apparently Elon Musk has set his sights on the Department of Defense and trying to track down what they do with their money. These are the things that get you shot, right?
No, I wholeheartedly support his attack on USAID.
But
It was a long time coming. Defund Planned Parenthood, defund the Department of Education, install actuarial accounting, honest accounting for what goes into the Defense Department. Of course, you've got to do this.
I mean, the last president to try this was Nixon, I think, to kind of get control of things. and of course he found himself.
No, Jimmy Carter tried to
He
break
did, yeah, right. He did. He had the Saturday Night Massacre in the CIA, and they turned that, and they arranged the Iran thing and got him out of office. Yeah,
Yeah, George H.W.
yeah.
Bush mobilized all the CIA agents that got fired, and they drove him out of office. And the Ayatollah Khomeini collaborated with
Well, Trump,
them.
he also signed an executive order, I think, creating a pro-Christian task force and a faith office.
What does that mean? What
I
does that
don't.
mean?
Well, isn't that quintessentially American? It's kind of ill-defined Christianity.
I mean, do you mean Seth and the Zionist, Christian Zionist lunatics that want to rebuild the temple? Christian is is a
Yeah.
pointless term. It's an empty term. It means nothing in
Well, it's
this.
just. I think it's Paula White Kane, who was a longtime pastor in the independent charismatic world. That doesn't sound good.
No, no.
But again, if you're trying to defend Christianity, who have been Christianity's historical enemies? Yeah, it ain't Islam, right?
That's right.
Right?
What did St. Paul have to say about women who want to take off their head covering and preach in church, especially when they start babbling some type of talking in tongues?
Yes.
No. How can we have a rational discussion about what Christianity means? I don't think so. We have fictions here in America. The fiction of the uh, basically any if you wake up tomorrow morning and you call yourself a minister and you call the storefront below your apartment a church, the government accepts that as a political fiction. There is nothing real. This is not a category of reality.
Well, in
It's
America, every man's a king and every man's a pope.
every man his own pope, every man his own priest. Yeah,
Mm.
Walt Whitman used to say that.
With a
What,
gun.
what, where does that lead us? That leads us to Walter Lippmann, public opinion. Look, it's hopeless. You can't talk to Americans. You got to manipulate them. That's exactly where that leads.
That's democracy, right?
That's democracy. It's totally untenable. We'll have secret agents behind the scenes doing the real decisions, and we'll give the people bread and circuses like the Super Bowl.
Congratulations, by the way.
Don't congratulate me. I don't live where that is.
You're not going to the parade in Philadelphia?
I was longing to go down to Broad Street and tear down a telephone pole or a traffic light. You can't tell. I had to, my wife had to chain me into my chair to keep me from getting on the airplane. I was so in love. This is crazy. What is this?
What,
I remember
was it?
Philadelphia when they didn't do this kind of stuff. I remember Kensington Avenue when it was the working class.
Isn't that where they used to manufacture TV sets or something that's sold to the country? TVs and radios in Philadelphia.
what was no? What was that across the street? Oh, RCA. What was that? Where your mother used to work? That was in Camden. What? It was RCA in Camden. It's right across the river.
Okay, well, that area, right? It's manufacturing, right?
They
That gets another.
manufactured a lot of stuff there. They got rich manufacturing clothing for the Civil War. And then
Well,
the WASPs all built mansions that were beautiful mansions. So, yeah, this was the manufacturing place. And it got destroyed. After the war, the workers said, we want a raise. They were being paid pennies. And as soon as they asked for a raise, the WASP elite that was supposedly committed to Philadelphia moved the factory to South Carolina. And then as soon as the people in South Carolina asked for a raise, they moved it to Mexico. And as soon as the Mexicans asked for a raise, they moved it to China, and so on and so forth. This is capitalism.
well, here you go. I mean, you read that article a few years ago, "The Twilight of the Oligarchs," about the Rambouillet decision in 1975, I think it was, when they hired, what's his name, the homosexual from San Francisco. He taught. Who was his name?
Harvey Milk, you mean?
Well, no, he's the promote sexual liberation over workers' rights.
Oh, Foucault.
Uh,
Yeah, Michel Foucault.
Thank you, French name. Yeah, I knew it was a French. Where they started promoting that, but this is a decision, sort of, both in the European community and also the United States, to deindustrialize, to farm out all the labor abroad, and turn to real estate finance. What do they call it? Real estate.
Well, return to usury. And
Yeah, usury. Yeah.
this is a period in which trillions of dollars were translated from the lower 90% to the upper 10%, the upper 1%.
Hmm.
Trillions of dollars transferred because of usury and deindustrialization. They're two sides of the same coin. The leveraged buyouts of the 1980s, introduced by our great conservative Ronald Reagan, basically allowed these financiers on Wall Street, Ivan Boesky, this crowd, to load companies down with debt and then sell them off and wreck the livelihoods of people all across America.
So this
Mitt
decision was.
Romney made a bit. Mitt Romney got rich doing this.
Mhm. This is a decision that was taken in the 1970s and 80s. Free trade, low tariffs, NAFTA, these things. Trump now is creating these, is imposing these tariffs. It appears to be trying to reshore production back to the United States. This is another thing where it's almost like, how is he going to navigate this if he really is intent on taking on the deep state, shutting down, cutting off the money spigots like USAID, going into the Defense Department, at the same time raising tariffs, which is necessary in order to reshore industry back to the United States to sort of rebuild the American industrial base. There's going to be a very painful correction involved in this because you can't do that in the meantime and puff up the stock market.
No, you can't. Who said you could do this overnight?
You can't.
Who said you could?
Yeah.
And I don't think it had any real economic rationale. I don't think Friedrich List would have agreed with what Trump did to Canada and Mexico because
Yeah.
as soon as they capitulate, they kowtow to him. He lifts the tariffs. What's the point of that then? The point of a tariff is to protect the manufacturing base of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Period. If God created the world with unequal resources because God believes in commerce and trade. Okay, that's good. That's good. You can take that to an extreme though, where it's bad, and you can't absolutely. You have to do this sensibly. You can't make up for 30 years of pillaging overnight by slapping a 25% tariff on Canada. That's not going to work. Not going to work, and then lift it the next day anyway because Justin Trudeau kisses your ass or something like that, or the Jewish lady in Mexico kisses Trump's ass. And so all's forgiven because it was really just for his ego. That's stupid. How are you going? First of all, let's look at Mexico. It was the cheap GMO corn got shipped in from Texas that wrecked the agricultural economy of Mexico
Mm-hmm.
because the people there who were planting corn on a local level could not compete with this cheap shit flowing in from Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Drove them all out off the land. Well, guess where they're going to go? They're going to come to America and mow the lawn up here because you drove them off the land in Mexico. These are things that are going to have to this is not going to happen overnight. Are you going to be able to reconstitute ever the peasant class in Mexico? Well, whether you do or you don't, it's not going to happen overnight. And it's not going to happen simply by slapping a 25% tariff on whatever comes out of Mexico.
Yeah, that perhaps that was imposed to get them to cooperate on the border issue and the fentanyl issue. But you're right. There's no long-term vision there. I mean, there's no Listian vision for economic independence and restructuring the U.S. economy to make it sustainable on a long-term basis, as opposed to what it is now, which is just debt fueled, infinity debt.
Right.
Money printing.
Does Donald Trump understand that labor is the source of all value? Sometimes I think he does. Sometimes I think he doesn't. Sometimes he's the friend of the worker. Sometimes he's the friend of the Jewish usurer. It depends on which Donald Trump shows up to work in the morning.
Well, he's been a debtor, right? And he's been let off the hook several times.
Yes.
Right. Which shows that when you're dealing with usury, practically speaking, you have to have a jubilee, if you will, right, time to time, because it's unsustainable.
Otherwise, What's magic about 80 years? I think it's the other side of the coin is it's when a floating loan becomes unrepayable.
Yeah, because you have the Bank of England 1690s, then you have the American Revolution, the American Civil War, and then you have the 20th century of the Great Depression. So roughly, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think that,
yeah.
and so this is something we have to take seriously. We've got trillions of dollars, $300 trillion in debt. The debt payment alone, the interest payment alone, is consumes the entire federal income,
Hmm.
the income of the federal government. Nothing destroys a country faster than usury, and it usually happens within this 80-year period.
So then we're getting back to again Catholic social teaching on this.
Yes, and Leo the 13th was against rapacious usury.
Hmm.
I tell this to Catholics, and they say, "Well, I'm against rapacious usury too. I just like ordinary usury."
Well, if you're borrowing below the inflation rate, is that usury?
No,
No, it's not, right? So they've messed it up so much. Now you can.
no. Obviously,
Yeah.
if it's below the inflation rate, no, it's no interest. You're not charging interest or pay or earning interest.
I mean, when Larry Fink can borrow money at zero interest from the New York Fed and then buy up real estate, residential real estate, to LLCs and come to dominate the real estate market.
I know that's what's happening in South Bend, Indiana, right now.
Hmm.
I get
Hmm.
5 phone calls a week.
So do I.
Some Chinese lady wanting to, or Indian lady wanting me to sell my house.
They asked me, and I said, "Give me $1.5 million. You got a deal." And they hung up on me.
Yeah, I know, I know.
But yeah, it's well, that's yeah, it's usually it sets the economy on a trajectory which is completely unsustainable, which inevitably leads to basically oligarchy because it creates a financial well, it concentrates wealth, you know.
Oligarchy leads to revolution,
Mhm.
then revolution leads to the arrival of the tyrant.
So
That's
I mean,
Plato. Plato says that in the
mhm,
Republic.
it's a cycle, and um, what so with Trump, I mean, he's gone after again. It's what at a certain level, some of his moves would suggest that is a concerted and serious effort to take on what we call the deep state, dismantle these things, go after his enemies, whether it's out of retribution or justice. Sometimes the two aren't necessarily in conflict, actually. But he seems sort of to be adroitly attacking these centers of power that you'd have to take on at first to initially wrest control, right? I mean, this was something that would have to be done. That's a positive, I guess, interpretation of events. But at the same time, he still has to play the game with the Jewish lobby,
Right.
and there's an internal contradiction, like speaking out on behalf of Christians and then not taking on the Jewish power,
Right.
which you know,
It's
uh,
incoherent. It's
yeah.
going to lead to a civil war, and it's going to cause him problems.
Well, when he gets a golden page from
Ah, we're
what is
going to
it?
blow you up, Donald.
I
We're
mean,
going to blow
didn't
you
they
up.
make same threat to Harry Truman in 1948 when they offered him lead or gold? And
Is that what they did? I know Truman switched because of
he
Jewish.
got $2 million overnight for his campaign when
Yeah, well,
he,
that's real money in 19, what is it,
yeah,
40?
yeah, definitely because you spend it like in swing states like Pennsylvania, you know. But I mean, that's an old. I mean, obviously the Zionists, the Jews have always have, been easy. They've always resorted to these things, whether they bribe you or they threaten to kill you. That was
Right,
very important in the formation of Israel because there was a series of assassinations and briberies that took place in order to achieve that objective in the 1940s. You had a series of assassinations in Israel. I mean, in Palestine.
right.
Yeah, all the
Yeah,
bombings that took place there.
yeah.
So I mean, what you've sat back. We're a lot of month in the administration, a lot of activity. I mean, there's some good signs, but then I mean, I can't say I'm disappointed 'cause I didn't really expect him to take on the Jewish lobby. You know,
My expectation was that he would come in and basically what that guy, the big Jew from New York who was his emissary.
a Witkoff or something.
Yeah, Witkoff calls
Yeah.
up and says, tell Beebe I'm going to be in his office tomorrow at 10:30. And the assistant says, well, it's a Sabbath. And Witkoff says, I don't give a shit whether it's a Sabbath or not. No, to be there. In other words, this attitude, like the attitude like between Norman Finkelstein and Alan Dershowitz. Like, who's the big Jew? Who's the toughest Jew in Borough Park? That was what I thought was the appropriate stance to Netanyahu. Like, I'm the boss. I know, you do what I say, period, and we're cutting off your weapons. But he apparently backed down. He's not, he doesn't have that, what should I say? That, what is it Napoleon and Alexander the Great had? That audacity. There's an element of audacity in his behavior, but where it really needed, it's not there. Not there because you're audacious when you face the big issue. That's where audacity is needed, and not these sideshows.
Yeah, he goes up there and he from the podium he talks. He floats this plan about U.S. owning Gaza and developing it like Trump's ever the developer and and but then again he's there highlighting the fact that Bibi's made a mess of it there. So I don't know how to interpret that. I don't
Now,
think they like each other.
I know that I don't think they like each other either, but
Um, but
I think there are two poles to Donald Trump's mind. One is professional wrestling, and the other is negotiation for real estate deals in New York.
mhm.
And I think this is the strategy of negotiation is to come in with some completely outrageous demand and then back down when you get to the actual table, and then everybody heaves a sigh of relief, and you're happy to sign on to something that you otherwise would not have entertained. This is what he did with North Korea.
Yeah, but I think with Trump, we're saying Trump obviously is the man, in the presidency at the time. And I think you said it years ago. It's not what matters isn't so much Trump; it's what he represents, the people behind him, and where we are now. We're in this third turning, if you will, and the ending of sort of the post-war consensus, the post-war dispensation, is sort of incarnated in the person of Donald Trump, who in himself, like so many people of his generation, so many Americans, is laments what's going on with the country, is unhappy with, but doesn't really understand it or is unwilling to.
Look, the
Yeah.
classic example of what we're talking about is what was created after World War II. Conservatism was created after World War II.
Hmm.
I think the CIA created it. Well, then suddenly we got to the point where people like me started saying, hey, neoconservative means Jew. And I think that's precisely what the transition that Donald Trump took. So cut the bullshit here. It's not conservatism, it's just Jewish interest. That's it. This was the facade that they had at National Review with people like Robbie George talking about Judeo-Christian values and all this type of, as if there's some type of conservative public uh, public ideology. Oh no, it was all just Jews all along. And the Jews took over the conservative movement when Norman Podhoretz and Midge Decter showed up during the Reagan administration. And that's all it's been ever since. And we call them neoconservatives, which is really a euphemism for Jew. And so Trump is saying, yeah, that's right. So I'm just here to take care of the Jews. I'm not a conservative.
Yeah.
I'm
Well, they
fighting
took
on
over
government.
because they weren't excluded from it. Because if you let them in, they take over. Who said that?
Theodore Hesburgh,
Father Theodore Hesburgh,
Father Theodore Hesburgh, former president of Notre Dame.
and he was a liberal.
He was a liberal.
He liked to march in civil rights marches, and
If
he's
you let the Jews in, they take over. And he was the guy who let the Jews into Notre Dame. He let Sam Shapiro in, first Jew they ever hired.
who
I knew
started
Sam
he
Shapiro.
started teaching like a Jew, right?
Of course he did. What else he's going to teach like?
And isn't there a statue with him of Hesburgh and Martin Luther King there?
In the center of South Bend, Indiana. Yes, it's that iconic photo, which is pretty much Notre Dame's identity marker.
And Hesburgh was more proud of that than he was getting a ring from the Pope, right?
No, yeah, well, yeah, from Paul the Sixth.
So, but it's interesting. Hesburgh again, who's very liberal, was very liberal, would say that.
This is a generational thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Hesburgh was the same age as my father. And that was a generation where the Catholics aspired to be accepted by the WASP, but they didn't like the Jews, you know? And so there was a point where the WASP didn't like the Jews either. And so if you aspired to be a WASP, you could still hold on to that reservation about the Jews. But, you know, Hesburgh himself capitulated. He hired Sam Shapiro basically sent him to the Ford Foundation to prove that they were liberal people at Notre Dame.
Wasn't because he's a rainmaker. He could bring in money, right? Wasn't that it?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
yeah, he that's exactly right. Sam told me he was worried about. They had this interview going through the formality of an interview, and there's a dinner, and everybody's drunk at this point, and except Sam, who's worried because he's got to. Said, well, shouldn't I give a talk? Nah, Hesburgh said to hire you. Forget it. Have another drink. That was Sam Shapiro's enter, and he said I didn't even get my suitcase unpacked before they sent me to the Ford Foundation to ask for money.
Hmm. So they wanted the big foundation money. And of course, as you read, the foundations are like the NGOs. These are the institutions that actually are engaged in social change and social engineering that no one ever gets to investigate or look at. We tried, Congress tried in the 1950s with the Reese
Right.
Commission, and it was
The
shut
Reed
down.
Commission. Exactly. It got
Yeah.
shut down completely by Wayne Hayes. And Wayne, oh, by the way, Wayne Hayes had given his sex history to Kinsey. Ha! Oh dear.
That's
Uh,
right. In the 70s, that scandal broke, right?
yeah, remember Elizabeth Ray, that cute lady who couldn't type, who was his secretary?
Yeah, but then she like jumped naked in the tidal basin or something. I
Something
just
like that.
something like that. We were so innocent back then. It
Yeah.
was like
Then there,
that was a scandal. Imagine that.
yeah. It wasn't even the only. There was Wilbur Mills,
Yes, another one. Yes,
and he was going around with Fan Fox, the Argentine firecracker, when he wasn't drunk. When he was drunk.
she was good at typing, right? He was from Ohio, wasn't he? Oh, I remember. Yeah.
Anyway, that's what killed the Reese Commission. It was Wayne Hayes, and he was obviously had something to hide there, didn't he?
So that it gets into libido dominandi, sexual liberation as political control, because he was probably compromised sexually, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That was the whole point of the FBI. That was a blackmail operation. And Kinsey was a blackmail operation, and Hugh Hefner, Playboy Mansion, that's blackmail. And that leads us right up to Jeffrey Epstein, the same modus operandi.
I thought Hugh Hefner just advocated freedom.
Hugh Hefner, first of all, Hugh Hefner was the only goy at Playboy magazine.
Yep. And what, the Playmates had to be in by 9 p.m. every night or something?
Yeah, they did that Netflix series on there. But there's one point where suddenly one of these idiots who's going to the Playboy Mansion notices there are cameras in every room. And so some reporter writes, "Well, why are there cameras in?" "Oh, I just thought it'd be interesting." Oh, as if he's a voyeur or something like that. I'm sure he was a voyeur, but the point is, you want to get incriminating evidence on everybody who comes there, and you invite all these influential people, and then they can't do anything.
That's right. Because Hefner he was legitimized. He would show up on the Tonight Show. I think he had a guest appearance on The Odd Couple, the TV show, and he was always came across as friendly and sort of easygoing. And the guy was a lousy pornographer. I mean,
He was given the ADL's Torch of Freedom Award in 1984. And at that point, even Buckley couldn't stand it. He blew up and denounced the ADL. It shows you what even Buckley couldn't stand that.
mm-hmm. Torch of Freedom. Who's that Jewish criminal they gave it to too?
Mo Dallas.
Mo Dallas. Yeah, the Las Vegas guy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, well, Dr. Jones, I think we covered it.
I think so. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Tim.
Thanks for coming back on the show. The new book, how long?
Weeks.
A few weeks out.
Inshallah. It's already written. We're doing the layout, and then we got to send it to the printer. So
Walking with a Bible and a Gun: The Rise and Fall and Return of American Identity.
Yeah.
Excellent. And again, I don't think our talk today is meant to blackpill or discourage people, just kind of put a proper perspective out of it all.
Our
Right?
hope is in the Lord.
Yeah. And let's see what
And if
happens.
you think you can do this without some type of supernatural help, you're deluding yourself.
Well, Trump said it after he got shot that he had knew a different relationship with God, whatever
Yeah.
that means.
Yeah.
So I can't, judge that, but whatever. But like I said, politics is always a mixed bag, usually more bad than good. There's more good here than usual, but we're early on, but again, there's a lot of problems, which I expected. I don't think that this thing's going to be resolved in the next 3-4 years. This is I think we're coming on the third turning, and we're coming on some drastic changes, I think, in our society and the world. And
Yeah,
it's
I agree.
yeah, it's probably an end of a 500-year cycle, I think. And so how do we make sense of that, in terms of our life or in terms of a political cycle? How will it play out politically, right? How do these world changing events play out in terms of media coverage and electoral politics? It's had to make sense of these things. Well, listen, I want to thank you for coming back on, and I will wish you a good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Good talking to you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.